This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Anyone, any questions, guys, before we can get started? So yesterday, mostly we were talking about the interview questions and how to go ahead and read those, and how to prepare ourselves and what is the expectation, and just doing a revision of all these things around. So, any questions today? Any questions before we can get started? Anyone, any questions that I can take before we can get started today? All right. So let me get started. I'll just mute the mics out there. Uh, Please use the chat window to go ahead and, let's say, just talk about immediate questions that you need out there. I'll go ahead and address them, and let's get started. So we were doing partial, let's say, on the Friday, and we were just talking about how to go ahead and create a new storage account. So we did talk about a couple of commands earlier. So let's do a quick recap of all those commands, and let's go ahead and, let's say, start today's session with a new command out here, a new, let's say, concept out here. But before I go ahead and get started, just like to, let's say, do a quick recap with y'all. So how do I log into Azure using PowerShell? What is the command that you need to use to, let's say, log in out here? Anyone who can take this? What do
Connect
you think
AZ
is
account.
connect AZ account, or is it connect hyphen AZ account?
Mm.
Connect hyphen AZ account out here, and a resource group. How do you check whether a particular resource group exists or not? What is the command to get your resource groups out there?
Get
Get
It
a
is.
get a slash AZ.
AZ resource group, exactly.
Mm.
Resource group, and if you want to remove something, then it would be somewhere like remove hyphen AZ resource group, right? So it would be remove hyphen AZ resource group for removing a resource group out here. And finally, if you want to create a new one, you would use something like new hyphen AZ resource group. And before we, let's say, before yesterday's session, we were discussing how to check whether a particular resource group exists or not, and then go ahead and create the same thing. And then later we also did how to check whether a particular storage account exists, and, let's say, go ahead and create the same thing out here. So these are the basic commands that you're looking at. And also, when you look at a storage account, we said it is new hyphen AZ storage account to
New
create
account.
a storage account, to create a new account out here with, let's say, multiple parameters like the replication, the access tier, the the location, the name, and all these things are something that we passed using the parameter concept. So that's something that we are going to look at today. And today's session, I would like to introduce two more commands, which is new hyphen AZ storage container. As in, how do you go ahead and create a storage container inside a storage account? And how do you upload a blob inside the storage container using a command called set hyphen AZ storage blob content? These are two more commands, and the first command is to create a container. Second command is to upload a file or upload a blob inside a container. Upload a blob inside the container out here. Inside the container. So these are the two more extensions, or these are the two more commands that we're going to look at. And let's start writing the bare basic structure of how do you go and create a resource group, and then create a storage account, then create a container inside it, and also go ahead and upload a file inside it. So let's understand a single line commands, and then later we'll club it with our knowledge that we have from Windows PowerShell to write an end-to-end program on how do I achieve this end-to-end with reusability, with checking whether the container is there, checking the blob is there, and all these things out, and then, let's say, making it absolutely reusable. This is something that we are really going to focus upon today. But before I get started, any questions, guys? Anyone, any questions that you think that I need to address before I can get started? Okay, I see a couple of things out here. Go, please.
Yeah, subscription will be end by this weekend for us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Uh, we need to subscribe with another credit card for practice, or it will be completed by this weekend as well.
So after it is completed, please use another, let's say, subscription. Sorry, after it is completed, please use another credit card for a new subscription out there.
Okay, okay, Kiran.
Yeah, I can Bhaskar here.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Kiran, I have sent one code in the chat.
right.
I have tried it with just giving the name that worked, but
Mm-hmm.
when I used location, it did not work for me. I don't know. And I
Can
used
you?
if
Yeah.
condition with
Mm-hmm.
and operator.
Right. Bhaskar, can you
Uh,
do one thing? Can you just send me across this one? Let me store this code out here. Yes, I get this code. I need to, let's say, just check what the code really is doing. Can you do one thing? Can you just send this to me across over the email address, just
yeah,
classes Azure DevOps at gmail.com. And when you
oh,
send it, can you also send me what is the error that you're getting so that I can look at the error and then understand what exactly that you're doing?
sure, sure.
So please
And
use this one. Yeah, please use this particular ID and
yeah,
send it to me across so that I can address the same thing and I can take a look at the screenshot and I'll also, let's say, understand what the error that you're getting out there.
sure. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's get started. Let me mute you all for a quick minute and let me start with the session out here. So I'll just park this around. All right, so let's start creating a new resource group. So RG, I don't really have an RG today. So if you look at this one, I just have two resource groups that I'm using for the next demo. But I'll do one thing. I'll just go create a new resource group for myself. I'll say new hyphen AC resource group. I'll say hyphen the name of the resource group. I'll say this is demo RG. And I'll say that the location of the resource group is something like ECS2. So I'm giving a couple of parameters out here. The name of the resource group and the location of the resource group is something that I went ahead and declared out here in that new hyphen easy resource group command. And once I execute this, it should go again. I did not do a connect hyphen easy account because I have already connected to the account, so my credentials are already stored. I did not do a logout. My credentials are already stored. Reason being, I did not do a disconnect out there. And then after this one, I'll go ahead. Now let's check this out if it's created or not. Again, it'll take some time to get reflected. So let's come back in a minute. But the partial terminal tells me that it is connected, it is, let's say, created, which is demo RG, which is ECS2 and etc. Now let me go ahead, create a storage account, a simple storage account service out here by using the command called new hyphen az storage account hyphen the resource group name that I want to create this in, which is demo RG hyphen the name of the storage service. I'll say this is PowerShell PS storage ABC000 USC. So something like this, that the name is unique, has, let's say, 3 to 24 characters and everything. I'll say SKU name here is standard LRS. I'll say the location here is East US2 and the kind of the storage is storage V2, and then I'll say access tier here is hot. So these are all the parameters that I'm passing. Again, I'm passing mandatory parameters still here. All these are now the mandatory parameters out here, and after that I'm passing some optional parameters like storage v2 and hot storage account out here. Even though if I do not, let's say, mention this out, storage service will still be created in v2 and the access tier will still remain hot. And I'll just go ahead and execute this particular line of, or execute this particular piece of command. Again, I'm just doing Azure PowerShell. I'm just applying all these commands to Azure. I'm not combining it yet with Windows PowerShell, which I will do, which I'll get in some loops, I'll get in some checks out there and make sure that my script is absolutely reusable out there. So let me go ahead and execute this out, wherein it's going ahead and trying to create a new storage account inside an already existing resource group that I went ahead and created in the very first line. So if I just go here, I now have the demo RG that is created, and inside the demo RG, I'm now trying to place a storage account inside it. And after placing or after creating the storage account inside it, I will now start looking at how do I create a container inside this one. How do I create one single container inside a storage account? If I'm able to, can I create multiple containers in the same way using a for loop or a for each loop and etc. This is the idea behind, let's say, creating, or this is the idea behind having a script out there in the place. Let's give us a minute out here. Let's check this out. It will take a minute or so for this particular script to run, and finally this is done. Now it's telling that okay, fine, it is new -az storage account, and in return it gave me what is the name of the storage account called ps storage demo rg and all these things out. So I have a storage account created, and the written output is telling me that okay, fine, the storage account is now created and etc. Let me do a cls. Let me go back into my Azure portal. Let me refresh the screen, and I see a storage account that is created called ps storage abc usc2, which just got created 811. That's when I ran my command. Just got provision PowerShell checked that okay, fine, this is good and all that stuff, and just scroll down inside the containers. I don't have any containers out here. There are no containers because I just created a simple storage account. I did not upload, I did not do anything out there. So just a simple container, just a simple thing out there that I went ahead and created right now. Now let me go ahead and let me start talking about a storage container out here. In order to create a container, now before I go and create a container out here, did anyone try how to go ahead, or did anyone try this out to go ahead and create the container? If yes, did you face any challenges with this? Did anyone try creating a container out here?
Hi Kiran sir, I tried this and
Okay,
I'm getting like context. There is an error on
context
context.
error. So you tried something called new hyphen az storage container. So let's type in the command storage account container. Let's see. Storage storage container. So this is the bare basic command that we normally try out. And if even if you take this out and throw it out in the Google, let's go here and try to do a Google search. And this will talk about, or this will give you an example on how to create a container. It's just telling the name of the container and the permission that you need to give. The permission here is nothing but the access level, meaning when I go ahead and create a container, I have three different public access levels out here, one being private, blob, and container level access out here. These are two mandatory fields out here. So I'll just go ahead and I'll say new -az storage container. I'll say name. I'll say the name here is a test container. Even the permission, whether I want my container in private, I want it in blob access level, or I want it in, let's say, the container access level out here. And there is something called unknown, and when you put it as unknown, it will just take the private. So I have three things out here: blob, container, off. Off here means private. So I'll take this in off, and I'll now go ahead and execute, or I'll just run this particular line of command, which will help me create a container out here. And this is the error you most likely might have got. Thing that could not get the storage context, please parse in the storage context or set the storage context out here. Now what exactly this means, now to understand this, let's understand this command firstly. Now this command in the documentation is also not that clear, so let me go into the documentation. The documentation simply tells you to go ahead and, let's say, pass this out. Even the documentation is not that great, not that clear out here. Now to understand this, let me come back and let me talk about this error a little bit. Let's talk about this error. Now, what you'll understand by this error, could not get the storage context, please pass in the context or set the current context of the storage. So did anyone get this error, and did you all try to do a Google search out here?
Under which storage group we creating container?
Under which storage account we are creating container, not storage group, but storage account that we are creating a container. Exactly. Did I anywhere mention in this particular line that what is the storage account this container needs to be created under? No. Did I anywhere tell that what is the resource group that I need to create this in? No, nothing. For which this command expects something known as a context. Very, very important, but unfortunately not covered in the documentation out here on what context really is. So that's the reason you need to, let's say, do a Google search on how to create a storage container using all these things out in a lot of things. Basically, they explain on how to go ahead and create this out end to end script on how do you go ahead and get a context and what exactly is a context and all these things out. Now let's do this. Let's go back into our partial terminal and let us ask a few questions out here before I go ahead and create a container. Let's try this out. Now, if I want to get a storage account, now the question here is that, please hear my question and kind of answer this out. If I want to get the details of a storage account, like let's say storage name, then what is the command that I need to run? Anyone? What do you think is the command that I need to run to get the details of a storage account out there?
Get.
Get hyphen
Get
is storage.
get hyphen AZ storage is
Get.
exactly. I'll say get hyphen. I'll say AZ storage account, and then I can pass in commands like the resource group name, which is demo rg, and then the storage account name, which is this one that I passed earlier. I know that this particular storage account does exist. Sorry, I know that this particular storage account does exist. And if I run this out, what this does is that it goes into the Azure portal, execute this particular command, and it most likely will return me all the details of the storage account, like what is the name of the storage account, what is the location that it's created in, what is the provisioning state, what is the SKU, and all these things out here. So now if you see this, it's now in written telling me what is the name of the storage account, what is the resource group name, what is the primary location, what is the kind of the storage, what is the access tier, what is the SKU name, and all these things. It's now giving me a block of resources, or it's now giving me a block of, let's say, a set of, let's say, resources, or a set of, let's say, properties of this particular storage. Let's say I only want the name of the storage account, just the name, that's it. I only want this command to return the name. What can I do, or what should I be doing out here?
We can use
If I
hyphen
want,
line.
sorry, can you please come again?
Get storage account in
Get
the
hmm
hyphen
parentheses.
AZ storage account.
hmm
Only name. You can
Only
mention
name.
name.
Yes, I did mention name, but if I don't mention the resource group name out here, so
Mm.
if I don't do this, if I just run this out, it will fail because it says parameter set did not find and all these things out, because it needs a resource group name as well. So without a resource group name, I won't be able to, let's say, get this command successfully working, because this command expects a resource group name out here. So I'll have to, let's say, put a resource group name in front.
Okay.
Get hyphen storage in the parentheses
Mhm.
dot storage account name.
Exactly, in the parentheses I can pass all these things in the parentheses and filter out something called as storage account name. You can place this all these things again, the same thing we did in a resource group as well. We passed all the command in the parentheses, and we were putting a dot after the end of the parentheses and getting the entire storage account name as such. So if I execute this
You
out,
can remove resource group also.
exactly, we can do a resource group also. And if you want multiple properties out here, what you can do is, instead of using a parentheses, you can use a pipe,
Yeah,
and
we can
you
use.
can say a select, let's say, a statement out here telling that select, and then you can say the storage account name, the resource group name, the primary location, whatever properties that you need out here. Resource group name. And if I now execute this out, in return, I'll get, let's say, the storage account name and the resource group name out here. So anything, any method is super good with me. But what I'm trying to do is that out of this entire command, I am not really worried about the name of the storage account, neither the storage account or the resource group in which it's created, neither the location in which it's created. I'm worried about one simple parameter called as a storage account context. What do I mean by a context here? So let's put this command once again in parentheses. And instead of filtering out for the name or location of the resource group name, what I'll do is I'll give a dot here and I'll say context. There is a filter or there is a property called context. And let's say get this out. So let me run this out and let's see what a context really has. Now, context is a huge object which tells you what is the storage account fully qualified domain name, the name of the storage account blob.windows.net, the storage account name, the resource group in which it's connected, very importantly, the connection string to that particular storage account, the entire connection string to that particular storage account out here. So this is the entire context object. This is now known as a context. We call this as a context object out here, which tells you that what are all the information that is required for you to go ahead and create something called as a container within a storage account, for which you need something called as context. Now what I'll do is that without going ahead and or instead of going ahead and let's say running this command just the way it is, I want to store the output inside a variable called ctx context or anything abcxyz, whatever it is. I'm declaring a parameter with $ctx, and if I run this out, what really happens is that all the output that I got from the earlier command stored in something called as $ctx out here. Everything that I had in the earlier command is now, let's say, being stored in something known as $ctx as such. And once you let's say hit the $ctx, you get all the object, you'll get entire object out here. What I'll do is that since I have the $ctx in which ways I'm storing in the $ctx, I will say new hyphen az storage container, name of the container is test container, permission is off, let's say test container 01, permission is off, and space hyphen context. This is one additional line or this is one additional command that I'll pass. I'll say $ctx. So instead of let's say writing this entire command here in this particular place, I'm just taking whatever is there in ctx and passing this out. And if I run this out, now it says, okay, fine, you know what? I tried to create a container and a container got created. And if I go back into my Azure portal, I have a container called test container created in private using a PowerShell command called new hyphen az storage container. But the only missing piece here is the context. So I was able to get the entire context from the earlier command in line number 11, wherein I'm telling get hyphen az storage account, the resource group, the name of the container, and filtering out just the context out here. And once I filter out the context, I'm passing the same thing to the line number 14, where I am, let's say, getting the entire context block. And I am going ahead and creating that particular container as such. So this is now a script that goes ahead, creates a resource group, creates a storage account, gets the storage account context, and then goes ahead and creates the, let's say, the container inside the storage account out there. Any questions still here that I can take?
Context means it's a file path or anything.
No, context means when I say it's a storage account context, it has all the information related to that particular storage account, like the name of the storage account. So it's not a file path. It's all the information that you need to go ahead and create a container inside a storage account. So if you look at this particular context block, I have the name of the storage account, the connection string to that particular storage account, and etc. And this command called new hyphen az storage container looks for that particular context. Reason being, I pass this out. And how did I get a context? Simply ran a get hyphen az storage account. Instead of doing a dot storage account name, I set a dot context out here. Does that answer your question? And Maharshi is asking a question on the chat, which I'll quickly take, which is that how can I find out which params are mandatory, which are not? Also for the params that are not mandatory, how can I find out the default values for the same thing out there? For which you need to, let's say, read the documentation out here and understand what are all the parameters out here, what are the values that you can, let's say, kind of take out here. So inputs, what are all the inputs parameters, input a string, outputs, what are the output parameters, and etc. And if you read the documentation, just kind of look at this. It'll tell you what are all the default values that you can pass for a particular parameter out there when you are going and creating something. So it's all in there in the documentation. So I would just suggest you to just go ahead, look at this particular documentation, which will kind of help you out to understand what are mandatory and what are non-mandatory out there. Yes, any more questions with this one? On how did I create a container? On how did I pass the context? Where did I get the context from? And how am I using the same context out there? Anyone, any questions still here?
Can you repeat the context again?
Sure. So if I look at this one, let's see. So did you get this command, which is called get-az storage account? Yes, no, maybe. Did
Yes,
you get this
yes,
piece
sir.
of command? All right. So if
Yes.
I want to, let's say, get the storage account name, I'm saying dollar open close parentheses, and I'm passing just something called as a dot storage account name out here. Now the point here is that if I want to get a context, and what do you see that a context really is out here? So if I run this out, and what do you see inside something called $ctx? Do you see the name of the storage account? Do you see the connection string? All this together, all this together is called as a storage context, which tells you that where exactly your storage account is actually sitting in, which subscription your storage account is there in, which resource group your storage account is there in, and all this information is now carried forward to a next command called new -az storage container, which expects a context. If you don't give this simple, it'll kind of fail out here. It'll just say could not get the storage context, and if you just take this out, the easiest way to identify troubleshoot this out is just take this out, the entire error, copy it out. If you just go ahead into Google browser and paste this out here, it's simple. This will tell you how exactly that you need to go ahead and create this out. How exactly that you need to, let's say, use this command out here. So it's just as simple as that. So context here is very simple. It contains the information of the entire storage account, which, let's say, talks about what is the connection string, what is the resource group, what exactly is, let's say, uh, the the blob endpoints and all these things out here. So that entire object together is known as a context, and I'm using this particular context in the next command, which is new -az storage container, and I am giving the same context out here. Again, this is reusable. So if you want to test 02, and if you just run this out using the same context block, it'll still work. So context will remains the same. Constant context to a storage account will kind of remain the same. And if I refresh this out, I'll now have a storage or a test container -02 out here. So this is where context actually comes into picture, and this is how I use something called as a context block out here. Yes, anyone, any more questions here? Can we create SAS token key through PowerShell? Definitely yes. You can do a new hyphen